Hello and welcome back to Billy Goat Wargaming. This is going to be a painting video. Now, I have to add the caveat right at the start of this video to say I am no painter. I am a tabletop standard painter at the best. But I like the figures that I paint, and I'm the only person that I need to keep happy with that. So what I thought I'd do is, because there was discussion on the forum yesterday or the day before about painting styles and standards, I thought what I'll do is just do a little video to show how I do things. How I do things isn't necessarily the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things, but it's how I do things. And hopefully you might pick up something from this, or it might just pass half an hour or so of your time whilst you watch me do it. So, just to introduce you to my setup, I try to use as few pots of paints as I can. So, for instance, anything that's brown will generally get this paint, which is leather brown from Army Painter. Anything that is generally green will get this green skin colour from Army Painter, or sometimes a slightly lighter green called Goblin Green, but we'll go with that. All of my faces are painted using Barbarian Flash from Army Painter. I do use other paints like coat d'arms, and there might be some exciting news about coat d'arms coming up. This is a Vallejo paint, very good paints. And this is scarlet, so anything that's red will be painted in that colour, and yellow likewise. Certainly when it comes to adding the je ne sais quoi, that certain something, to the paint job, then whichever green, yellow, blue or red you choose doesn't really matter, because these are the magic bits that do the magic. These are Games Workshop shades, and the four principal ones that I use are Reichland Flesh Shade, which is sort of a reddish brown, I think is the best way to describe it. The famous Agrak Earth shade, which is a dark brown wash. Nuln Oil, which is actually black. Why it's not called black, I don't know, but it is a black wash. And lastly, Seraphim Sepia, which I think is more of a yellowish brown. It's sort of got a yellow tint to it, but I can use one or any or all of these pots when I come to put the ink on these. So I'm a speed painter. If I make a mistake, if I blodge, is that a word? If I splodge, for instance, on this figure here, on the belt, I'm really not too bothered, because once this ink goes on, it covers up most mistakes. Now, I'm going to be painting Wars of the Roses figures, because these are the ones that I've just got out of the box to have a look at. Now, both of these have been sprayed white and then given a wash. These ones at the front that are in this sort of creamy colour have been given a coat of Games Workshop's contrast paint, Skeleton Bone I think it's called, over the white. And it gives you a nice foundation for the quilted jacks. So you can see the jack on this fellow here, that will remain that colour. I don't need to paint that. And also maybe one or two of the leggings I might not want to paint. Just to point out something else, these fellows have got a little bit of armour. So here on the arm, got this sort of chest or breastplate here. And if you look at the legs, the legs have got a bit of armour as well as this guy. Now, sometimes I'll paint that in an armour colour, and sometimes I'll paint it as if they were leggings that these chaps were wearing. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, because from this distance, which is where you're going to see it on the table, it will just look like leggings. Only when you get it up close and you can see this armoured knee pad here, and maybe not on this fellow, but here, then you'd see it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Now this unit at the back is quite interesting. These got quite an interesting history. These were actually bought from a well-known wargamer from the south of the country who now lives in France, very close to Leslie Bilby Tippin, who lives in France also. These were bought from Mr. Ralph Ashdown. Now I've realised this is actually, just bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, I'm back. Just realised that the original base I picked up is actually a household base, and you can tell that because they're all in armour, they're fully harnessed. So they will go towards a household unit, and have just been fetched a replacement base of fighting men armed with bill hooks and pole arms. Still a little bit of armour on there. I'm not sure if these are the levy fighting men or the retinue type fighting men. I suspect this guy here in the quilted armour is a levy fighting man, and the man in the middle is probably a retinue fighting man because he's slightly better equipped. But it matters not. So, I'll be painting these as well. There's going to be an initial step with these which will get them more in line with this colour, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Just on the command base, so this 3 figures to the command base will designate this base as a retinue command. If there was just 2 figures on it, it would be levy, and if it was household, you'd be able to tell because they're all wearing fully harnessed armour. So because this guy here is fully harnessed, I've over the black undercoat, over the white undercoat, I've given it a wash of non-oil. So the black is a very good start for the armour. So there's those 2 units. Also, I want to just demonstrate what I do with black undercoated figures. I don't often undercoat in black, but these are some light British light infantry for the American War of Independence. Just a couple of spare figures that I had lying around already in black, so I thought I'd use these. What I'm going to do is paint one just over the black undercoat, straight on, which can be sometimes a little bit difficult, particularly if it's a far more matte black spray than this. Because this figure here, you can see there's a slight sheen on the undercoat, hopefully you can see that. Then you can pick out the details of the cross straps and the cuffs, the turn back on the back of the coat, and the hat here. Now, before I paint that, I'm just going to have to do a little bit of research. Can't quite remember how you paint those hats. But anyway, so I'll paint him here just from the black undercoat. And this one, I'm going to use a method that I described on the forum, where I give it a dry brush of grey, and what it does is just catches out the very top level of detail that's sculpted onto the figure. Sort of highlights the black, so you no need to do that. But it also shows the various bits. So on the back of this guy, we can see a satchel or bag of some sort. There's a water bottle there, and then we've got the cartridge pouch on the side that they carried into battle. So first things first. Oh, brushes. Here we go. So you can spend a lot of money on brushes. I never do. And I don't think my painting suffered for it. Sometimes you can say that if you buy cheap, you buy twice, but I'm not sure that's entirely true. You can see that on this brush here, the detail's worn off from consistent use, and the point on this brush remains fairly good. These 2 are army painter brushes, just because it's what I've got in. This one's called a Wargame character brush. Now that's probably a 0 or a 1, I would think, in the standard brush sizing system. And this is an insane detail brush. because it has got a very fine nib on it. And that is probably a double or 000, I would suggest. There's a slight bristle just poking out there, but a quick lick and it's fine. And then this brush, I use a lot of these brushes. These are, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it's called Royal and Langnickel. And these are very cheap brushes. And in fact, I've got Royal and Langnickel brushes very similar to my Insane Detail brush, which work perfectly well. And these are the sort of brushes that you would find 10 in a pack for £5, £6, something like that. They're sort of the cheaper end of the, well, at the very cheap end of the artist paintbrushes that are on the market. It's got a lovely little rubber ferrule here to hold, and they're perfectly good. I saw a YouTube channel called Midwinter Minis recommending these, so if you use Winsor & Newton Series 7, that's absolutely fine, but these do me just as nice. Now I have a very specialist water holder for my paint here. These are very expensive, so I've taken off the branding, so I don't sort of embarrass the company who charge an absolute earth for that. And also for my palette here, it's a specially designed palette with these grooves in it, which is for the professional painter. I don't know what these grooves are for, but I'm told that professional painters know exactly what to do with those. So I've got, oh, and also the specialist absorbent 3-ply paper, specially designed for miniature painting. I've got a whole roll of it here, which is nearly run out. But first things first, so I'm going to use this specialist artist tissue to do my dry brushing with. I'll just take another couple of sheets off to clean my brush with. So the first things first is to take a colour similar to this, which is a light cream colour. It's called Skeleton Bone by the Army Painter, but in actual fact it could be anything. It's basically just a very light cream colour. I'm going to put a little dot of it onto the palette there. This specially designed artist palette that guarantees success whatever you're painting. And I'm going to take my large Langnickel, Royal and Langnickel brush, and what I'm going to do is bring these darker brown figures up to this sort of level of creaminess, I suppose. So I'm going to get some paint on the brush and I'm going to rub most of it off. Might seem quite wasteful, but then what I'm going to do is just do quite a heavy dry brush. So dry brushing covers the raised areas, that's the word, the raised areas of the figures, and leaves the crevices and the depths alone, so you'll still get that sort of dark reddish brown, I think it is, that Ralph will have used to undercoat these figures. So there's absolutely no science to this. I'm just smashing the paint on, as my old granddad used to say. Smash the paint on, Sean. And there we go. So I'm going to do this for all these. So these figures are for the Wars of the Roses, and they are specifically for the Peter Pig set of rules called Bloody Barons. All of these figures are obviously Peter Pig, the finest War Games figures there ever were. And the new version of the rules sort of cuts in half the size of the unit that you require to play the game. Now, it was 8 bases, and now it's just 4 bases you need. So you'll notice there's 5 bases here, and that's because I've got some extra archers. Got some archers left over. I'm just contemplating what to do about this this situation because that's actually a household base. Because although the number of figures on the base doesn't really matter, actually, you can have one figure on there if you so wished. The sort of standard number is 3 figures per base. Now, in the previous rules, it mattered whether that base was an archer or a fighting man, so armed with a bill and polearm or a bow. In the new rules, that doesn't matter so much, which is great. But you still need to represent some bow figures on the base, and you need to represent, because that's what they carried. That's historically what these groups of men, I won't call them units, I'm not sure that's how they would have been referred to in the 15th century, but that's how they would have been armed, so you need to represent that on the table. And typically, during playtesting, a unit would look like this. So you would have a command stand with 2 or 3 figures on it. You would have a stand of bowmen with 3 figures, and then 2 stands of 3 fighting men. And that looks great. But I did wonder about spreading the bowmen in the back rank and have the fighting men in the front rank. So this is a unit that I painted last night. I thought, why not have, because I've got so many archers over, why not have 2 archers at the back and 2 fighting men at the front? But I'm just not sure yet if that's the route I want to go. I mean, painting 4 extra figures, essentially, for each unit is certainly not a bind. But I just don't know if the base looks too crowded with 4 figures on as opposed to 3. I don't know. I think I probably will go. With the 4 figure bases, 2 archers and 2 fighting men. Of course, the archers wouldn't always be in the back rank. They would generally be at the front firing and then retire behind the fighting men once the battle was joined. So that was a very quick dry brush of those. So as you can see, they aren't quite the same colour, but that's all right, because colours would have varied considerably during the period. So we are going to paint 2 kinds of units today. We're going to have a red, yellow liveried unit for the figures that have got livery coats. Not all of them will have. And then we're going to have a green and white. Now, if I look at my handy book from the Lance and Longbow Society Standards, Badges and Livery Colours of the Wars of the Roses, there are some rather handy guides to livery colours. So here we can see this, not sure if it's called a badge, a standard banner, I can't quite remember. But number 26 refers to Edward Neville, Lord Abergavenny, which has St George in the hoist. And in the field we've got vert over argent, or argent. So vert is the green, obviously. A Bourdieu, company vert and argent. Well, we have, looking at the border, we've got this hashing of green and white. With badges of a pied bull, passant, horned and hooved, crowned about the neck and chained or, entwined staples argent, and the motto, in a prom vient de noble si, or say. My Latin isn't very good. So these standards are very good for choosing what livery colours to use, because these are likely the colours that would have been used on the livery coats. So that's one. And the other, I've gone for red and yellow, and there is one in here. Just bear with me. Ah, there we go. It's the same page. Silly Sean. And that is John Touchet, Lord Audley, St George in the hoist. And it's or over gules, a Bourdieu company or and gules, Badges, a Saracen's head was, sable in profile, erased, hair long, bearded, and wreathed with the temples, argent and gold, charged with a crescent ore on the cheek. Moths, butterflies, argent, each charged with a crescent ore, and the motto is Je le tiens. I have no idea what any of that means, but there we go. Green and red and yellow. So it's yellow and red actually. So I'll take yellow on the top, being the left hand half of the livery coat. So just give the yellow a good shake. Yellow is typically a very difficult colour to manage over anything but a white undercoat, but hopefully it'll stick really well. So the only guy here in this on this base with a livery coat is the guy carrying the flag, and we said we'd do it to the left, so it's the right at the back. And I'm just going to put this on it now. I'm not going to be too gentle, careful, specific with this, because honestly, once the wash is on, once the figures are based, it really will not matter. Now these archers, this guy here, he's got a livery coat, so we'll paint his. These will be rebased, I think, so that they will have fighting men on their base with them. And generally I'll use the colour for one figure's trousers or hose, and then sometimes also the sleeves of whatever the undergarment is, just to tie the colour. It may not be entirely historically accurate, but I like to think it's inspired by history, not slavish to history. One can get rather too tied up in this, and people who listen, I'm not going to knock people who love to follow the exact colours and the exact shade of green, or the exact manner in which the clothing was worn. Absolutely more power. In fact, with my American Civil War figures, I will insist that my Union troops all wear sack coats. I will not have a Union figure on my table wearing a shell jacket, because from what I know of the war, and I am no expert, from what I know of the war, they just didn't wear them. So I don't have those in my miniature armies. Some people are far more free and easy with their history of the American Civil War, but for my knowledge of the Wars of the Roses, and it is a period that I do absolutely love to read about, but it isn't a core period for me. So my core periods are generally civil wars. You might call the Wars of the Roses a civil war, but when I talk about civil wars, I'm talking about Spanish Civil War, English Civil War, American Civil War. Obviously, in the Peter Pig stable, we're now getting the Mexican Revolution, which is great. Really looking forward to that. Right, so that's the yellow applied there. Now I'm going to put a bit of yellow on some trousers or sleeves of the green and white livery unit. So I'm not building these to any sort of historical order of battle, so these won't be specifically figures for Bosworth or something like that. They will just be generic Wars of the Roses figures. Now I may use the Freezy Water banners, I may not. I may just use the generic banners that Martin sells at Peter Pig, just for the sake of there being little or no confusion. My English Civil War armies all have entirely fictional flags based on history, but not Slavish to the history. Okay, so that's that. I think we'll let the yellow just dry a little bit longer on there. So what we'll do is add the white, I think, first. I do that because if I add the green first, I need to just cover over where the green is slightly. Then what I can do is, yes, the white won't cover over the green as easily as the green will cover over the white. So we always start with the lighter colour. That's a tip from the professionals. Oh, and that is entirely too much white on my paint pot. That's the one disadvantage of this style of paint pot, that when you squeeze out the paint onto the palette, you can sometimes end up with far too much paint on your palette. So you have to do one of two things. One is that you live with it and live that you've wasted a portion of your paint, or you can get some alternative figures out and splash that colour onto them as well. So what I'll do with these is, so there's a livery coat here, so let's do the left hand portion of the coat in the white. And what I'll do is, once I've added the colour to these, then I'll go back to the original unit and add a little bit of white to them as well, just to make the absolute most of it. Now, as I indicated at the start of the video, this is really, it's all about speed and minimum fuss, I think is the word. So the inks will do an incredible amount of work for you. So straps, belts, buckles, that kind of thing. So long as there's some sort of base there for them, then the ink will do the rest. So that's why we've got this sort of tan cream colour as the base. So here we go. We'll go on to this guy. Let's give him some white sleeves. There we go. That will be sufficient. There we go. Let's look at these. Pretty much the same figures. Let's give this guy some white hose or trews. The archers, let's give him a white sleeve. I do believe they'd have split coloured jerkins as well, I think. I'm not entirely sure on that. But anyway, he will have one red sleeve and one white. What I could do as well is just touch the top of the arrows. As we all know, they didn't carry quivers during the 15th century. So they'd either stick the arrows in the ground or slide it through a strap on their belt. sound like I know what I'm talking about. Okay, that's sufficient. Right, let's go back to the first unit, and these will now get scarlet. Now this paint can also spill out rather quickly, so I'm just going to be careful with it and make sure it flows. There we go, it's coming. There we go. That's probably too much as well. But as we did with the unit at the back there, we'll perhaps put a little bit of red onto the other unit. So you can see there the red and yellow of this flagman's coat. So anywhere here, I'm sure somebody like Mr. John Watson, member of the Lance and Longbow Society, may be shouting at the screen watching me attempt to paint these lovely Wars of the Roses miniatures from Peter Pig. Available at www.peterpig.co.uk. But these will fight just as well as the most expertly painted miniatures. And because I've painted them, I'll take great pride in putting them down onto the tabletop. So let's give this guy a red sleeve there. He's got some armour under his coat, so there's going to be a bit of silver on there at some point. Now this guy, you can see I can just about half the design, so it's sort of half red, half yellow. I can only really just see beneath his armour. So it looks like I've missed one of the coats here, so I'll just do this quickly. I very rarely go back to correct mistakes, to be honest, but whilst this yellow is free, no harm, no foul. It really is just a case of dotting the colour onto the jacket. And really, once you've got through this stage of the painting, you're practically halfway home. Maybe not quite halfway, but not far off halfway home, which is always a nice position to be in when painting War Games figures. Reaching that halfway point when you can see the fruits of your labours starting to come together. I'm conscious this video is probably going to be too long, but I may edit it down, I may speed it up, I may do something, I may do nothing, but let's see what becomes of it, shall we? I'm not going to add red to every one of these, I don't think. Maybe for this guy. It really is a bit of... This is one of the things that I enjoy about a lot of the periods that Peter Pig do. So Peter Pig don't do Napoleonics. Not only is it a rabbit hole that a figure designer would likely never appear from ever again, if he's to do it properly, but also the uniforms are pretty regimented, in the sense, that sounds a very obvious statement to me, but in the sense that all French infantry wear a blue coat with white belts and trousers and a black shako and a bit of red on it, whereas so there's very little room for any sort of creative freedom. Whereas with a lot of Peter Pig ranges, you'll find They're Civil War Revolution based, and a lot of the figures can be used for either side. So in the Wars of the Roses, there's a really good case in point, because all the armies were based the same. They went to the same clothing outfitters. They used the same equipment. They changed sides, so it's a pretty good job that they did. You're just talking about the occasional colour here or there, such as the livery coats, which would identify them. The American Civil War is fairly similar, but in the respect that Union are pretty regimented, but the Rebs, it's all bets off. It's anything from a dark grey through to light grey, and dark brown through to a very light brown. English Civil War, similarly. Spanish Civil War in the main. So again, you'll notice I'm not being entirely careful or clinical about how I'm applying these colours. I think it's not quite painting by numbers. It's really just about getting the paint in roughly the right place on the figure. Because, as you'll see, hopefully, if my battery doesn't run out, I don't lose the will to live, and my memory doesn't run out on the phone, you'll see the results of the washes, which really are the finishing touch to what these figures will be. Okay, so that is the 4 principal colours for the livery. Now, 2 colours here. Oh, 2 colours. We have leather brown and we have desert yellow. Yeah, desert yellow is more of a yellowy brown, I guess. It's a very light brown. But what we're going to do is go around the figure and look at scabbards, pouches, and the odd bit of clothing. So let's give, what we'll do is we'll just paint the pole of this standard in the brown. And whilst we're doing it, might as well just give the face and hands a little dink with the brown, because that just helps the flesh when it comes along. This guy's also got a scabbard, so we're going to paint a scabbard there. There's a scabbard here on this guy, and there's a more prominent scabbard on this guy. One thing I haven't mentioned actually, I'm painting these on the base on which they are going to be used. Now, that isn't always normal practice at all. It's what I do. I couldn't do this actually if I was basing them with 4 figures to a base. There just wouldn't be enough room, but because there's only 3 figures, you can reach any point on the figure that you need to. And it just speeds the whole thing along. There we go. So maybe give this guy some brown sleeves. So he's got some sort of brown jerkin beneath his quilted armour coat. There we go. Can we do on this one? I'll just give the arrows a bit of a splash of colour of brown. We've got some arrows here. We have a scabbard, some more arrows. Again, not being particularly careful. neat or tidy. The shoes will all be left in the base colour, and the wash, such as it is, will take care of that. The poles of the halberds, pole arms, will get that colour as well. So let's give this guy some brown trues. There we go. I'll not do all of the trues in the brown because I've got the other colour to come, which will be the last colour really, other than metal, to go on the figure. Metal and flesh, sorry. There we go. And it is just a case of popping along and not being too worried if you think that's not looking great. Just carry on, because the wash will cure your ills, it will salve your conscience. You will happily take these figures to your next Bloody Barons game day, to the Weymouth Weekender, down to the club, refight Bosworth or Towton or Heathcote Field. And I promise you, I faithfully promise you, your figures will fight just as well as any other figures on the table. Even if you haven't quite given them the same care of attention whilst painting that somebody else may have done. You say congratulations to that person who spent 8 hours on one figure. And you say, well done. Now, roll your dice. I'll roll mine and we'll see who the winner is. For some reason, what's happened here? So, these are the green and the whites. I've missed off, how remiss of me, this young fellow's green half of his coat. So there we go. It is a simple matter of just blopping? I'm not sure blopping is a word, but getting that colour on. So where are we? 43 minutes in. We haven't been painting for 43 minutes, absolutely not. So this is the last. I suppose I could have added a grey in there. Oh dear. A little paint spillage. Now where do we want this? Not sure he needs any. No, he's got a little satchel or something, so I might as well just give that a poke. We could just do a little line across there for the belt. These go. Okay, we've got a sleeve unpainted. Actually, the bit underneath the coat there. Let's do that, because I think that is probably part of the same garment. Not certain on that. And also this guy, let's give him the same colour sleeve as well. They obviously went to the same tailor prior to the battle. His trousers are done, as are his. I might actually, let's just paint over them, I think. It's probably a bit too dark on this figure. He's not got much colour on him at all, so I'll add that there. He's probably alright actually. Let's give him, let's paint over those bits of this is painted armour. think was a thing. Look at these guys. He is, let's just touch the bottom there. Not sure that's added anything at all to the look of the figure. And there. But he's probably okay to go. This guy didn't paint his whole... Oh, there we go. Yes, I think I've obviously missed off the entirety of the... Yes, I have. That's annoying. I won't ordinarily go back and fix mistakes, but this is an omission as opposed to a mistake. I've not done the halberd shafts. It's quite difficult painting with a camera in front of you, but I will do my best to keep you entertained. Are you not entertained as I paint these? I really just wanted to demonstrate how quick and easy it is sometimes when you let go of control and just go with the flow and don't worry too much. I painted a force for the Western rules that Peter Pig do, a posse, mounted posse, which I absolutely love, and I painted them in a day, and that was really all washes and dry brushes with very minimal go backs with some detailing or going over bits that had been missed, frankly, a bit like the shafts there of these figures. So I'll just get the shaft of the flagman, little down there, bit across there, bit there. He's got a scabbard of a dagger. I think they might have had a better name than dagger, maybe. What it is, I have no idea. And it really is just as easy as 1, 2, 3. Now, there we go. Nothing very exciting, nothing very groundbreaking. Well, let's do the archers. So I like doing my bowman with the cream that I started with, which was that sort of dry brush across the dark. Now I don't know what the wood's... Is it ash? Are they made of ash? English longbows? Whatever, it's... you notice I'm not even thinning the paint. This is literally straight out of the bottle and onto the figure. And not an awful lot of care or attention paid. I think they were ash, weren't they? Wow. What I should like to do is fight all of the historical battles of the rulebook, which covers all of the major battles of the Wars of the Roses, in sequential order. That'd be good fun. There was a guy, and I can't remember his name, but he started to do that with the original version of these rules. But I don't think he got terribly far with it. But it was a great idea. He certainly did St Albans, Blore Heath, and then I forget which one came after Blore Heath. Blore Heath is that way. So my window is over there. There's my gaming room window. You see the house that is opposite me there. In fact, that's the rest of the Wars of the Roses figures in the window. Blore Heath is probably 2 miles behind that house. So it's my local battlefield. although it's in private ownership, and what was once a brilliant reenactment day is no more. So yeah, he did that. I can't remember sequentially what was the next battle after Blorheath. Hence on a postcard. But I would like to do that. The game in the rule book, as you play, sort of the points game, or the standard game, as it were, would turn up and with your army and against your opponent's army, is great. I think that is very good, but I do like to play historical games, and I've actually played Blorheath at the Weekender. So in actual fact, I've not used the grey and the blue, so what have we used so far? We have used white. So I've used 7 paints so far. And the last 2 colours to go on is the silver and the flesh colour. And gents and ladies and others, everyone else, we're done. So, first bit is going to be a bit of a dry brush of this officer or gentleman or noble. That's probably what he is. A noble, a little bit of a dry brush over the top there. Again, the wash is going to sort that out. Then it's about picking out where the metal parts are, and there's quite a lot of metal on these fellows. So this will probably be the longest bit of the paint job. But again, I aren't particularly worried about being too neat. Now, again, this may horrify people, really, to watch Martin's beautiful figures be butchered in the manner in which I choose to paint them. But I do have a fairly good track record of getting figures on the table in games played, and Ken Riley in this podcast talks about the Venn diagram of wargaming. So are you a modeller? Are you a painter? Are you a historian, or are you a wargamer? And the Venn diagram part being, where on that continuum do you sit? Are you principally a wargamer with a bit of historical interest added in? I mean, who can't have historical interest if you're into this hobby? I don't know, but do you consider yourself more of a wargamer or more of a painter? I think that's the interesting question. And I am most certainly, I paint to play, not display. That's my new little motto. I paint to play, not display. So if I wasn't playing a game or didn't intend to play with these figures, I wouldn't paint them. I wouldn't paint them just for the purpose of displaying them, or the joy, the unburdened joy of owning several thousand figures. That isn't what this hobby is to me. That isn't the hobby at all. The hobby to me is about playing historically plausible games with nice figures on a nice table with friends. The friend aspect is very important to me. The friendship aspect. But essentially, I want to play the game. Now, there's an irony in this because I'm absolutely rubbish. I am one of these people who, without bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. and I'm probably the most tactically inept wargamer you could care to know. Having said that, losing, as I do frequently, bothers me not one little jot. If it did, I would have had to take up a different hobby, I have to say, because I would be wasting my time. But as it happens, it doesn't bother me. I love to... One of the best things, actually, is just before we throw first dice, my table is set up, ready for that first turn. One of the best things is just taking a step back and looking at that table, thinking, that looks cool, that looks really good. So if you've got some lovely terrain on the table, nicely painted figures, doesn't have to be display figures like what I am not showing you here. So long as they're nicely done, on nicely prepared terrain. So again, it hasn't got to be the sort of terrain that you may see in the glossy magazines. Absolutely not. And then the company of somebody with a similar approach to the hobby also helps. And that's before you've even rolled dice. So, you know, regardless of what happens once the dice are thrown, then it really doesn't matter. Your enjoyment, your level of enjoyment is already assured, because you've hit that goal of having the nice figures, the nice terrain. You put the work in to get the figures painted to a standard with which you're happy. Doesn't matter about anybody else, what they think, matters not one jot. So we are nearing the end of phase 1 of painting these figures, and I think you'll agree. Where are we? I'm just about to hit the hour mark, and I've got 30 figures here on the table, and they are not painted to any standard that could be aspired to other than tabletop. But there's colour on them. People who look at them, they might not like the paint job, but they'll know what they're looking at. They'll know they're looking at medieval, late medieval figures. There'll be colour, as in something nice to look at, not just browns. So there's the reds, the yellows, the whites. There we go. And once the base is on, then really, once these figures are on the table en masse, with probably, I don't know, 150 other figures of the same side, and same on the posing side, so what, 300 figures probably on the table. They're going to look just fine. There's a bit of, I think, a bit of an abstract approach, I think, to my painting, as I've gone on through the years. I did used to be this sort of quite anally attentive type who would go back and make corrections if I'd missed something, or would do the 3 layers of shading technique, the Dallimore technique as it used to be called. I don't know if that's what it's still called or if it's even still referred to as a technique. I don't know. I haven't used it in that long. And that was really until the Army Painter system came along, which I first saw at a Salute show. No, not Salute. Partisan, of course it was, Partisan. And Warlord had only just started in business. They had a tiny store. I think it would have been Paul Sawyer, the ex-editor of White Dwarf, on the store. Selling the Romans. That was their first box set, wasn't it? Those plastic Romans, which wowed everybody. That was at last we were getting plastic historical figures, so and therefore cheap historical figures. But they also were stocking Army Painters dip, which comes in 3 flavours, being strong, dark and medium. Strong, dark and light, or soft. There you go, and you get then in the end soft. Little break in coverage there. I do apologise for that. My wife was just ringing me, and I record these on my phone. So anyway, I was at the last stand anyway, putting the metal on, and that probably took, I don't know, 10 minutes, I suppose. So the last bit of proper painting. One interesting thing to note with these figures is that I am going to look at using the Lux Geek Gaming Ready Base Mixture. So basing has been a long time hatred of mine. There you go. And I'm always experimenting and messing around with how I base figures. The Lux APS range looks really good. So what it essentially is a mix of flock and grit and stones and sand and what have you. So the idea being that you just throw some PVA onto the base, dip your base into the mixture, and it comes out with quite a natural looking base ready done. So the flock will be on it, there'll be a few stones and a bit of grit and dirt and earth and look to it, that sort of thing. Whether it works with 15mm, I don't know, but I'm going to take a punt and buy a pack. I think they're only £3-4 maybe. And if it doesn't work with 15mm, then I can always use it for some of my larger figures. But I need to find something that's suitable. So I do have a version of it now, which I've used on some 28mm figures, fantasy figures. And it's sort of an aridy, plain look with not a lot of grass. Now I need that sort of that look reversed really for these figures, because these are fighting in England's green and pleasant land. So I'll see what they've got. I haven't quite made my mind up yet. I always tend to leave basing and flags to the last minute because for some reason it's just the part I don't enjoy, and I wished, and I may try this with this collection. I may try and reverse that and get the figures based and the flags on pretty much as a go, as opposed to all at the last minute, or as the last thing I do. Because I tell you what, basing and putting flags on your whole collection at once is a real pain in the backside. if you think painting all of these figures is a pain, try a method where you paint all your figures and leave basing and flags to the end. It feels like it goes on forever and ever. So it could pay dividends for me if I break the habit and get the flags and bases done as I go. I haven't made the final decision on flags yet. The choice of the freezy water banners or the ones that I think Martin sells that come from the square is the choice. There's the historical accuracy of using the freezy water ones, but that comes at a price. Whereas the generic ones are cheaper and the generic. So if I'm playing Bosworth and I haven't got the right standards on the field, then somebody might get upset with me, and I wouldn't like that to happen. As I've advanced through my hobby career, I find I'm far less fussy about painting. There we go. They're done. Or the painting's done. The good bit comes now. I love this bit. This is the bit I really enjoy. This is the payoff, I think, is how you might describe it. This is the payoff for, well, it's literally just over an hour's work, but what I'm going to do is experiment for you people. I'm going to experiment with these 4 shades. So we have Seraphim Sepia, Null Noir, Agrax Earthshade, Reichland Fleshshade. I think these are the best inks washes on the market, bar none. They go on straight out of the pot. They sink into the creases and the deeper parts of the model and leave the higher parts of the figure unstained. So what I'm going to do is do a base of each unit, each colour, because it doesn't really matter. The one that I'm probably most nervous about is the black, the Null Noir, but having done it on these figures here, it's alright. And listen, this is in the spirit of experimentation. So here we go. We're going to do both command stands. Is that how I should do it? Yes. Yeah, that's how I'll do it. So both command stands are going to be done in Seraphim Sepia, which, if I just pop this here, get a little bit on my brush. In fact, let's do it here. You can see the sort of colour that is. It's sort of a lightish yellowish brown, I think. But I'm going to load the brush. And you might see I've missed the silver off the back of this guy's helmet here, the guy carrying the flag. I don't care. I'm just going to pop that on. Look at the colour that you get. I won't do the guy fully in armour. I will do him in black because... Oh no, let's just do it, for goodness sake, Sean, come on. So his armour's looking a little bit rusty and a little bit worse for wear. But literally just taking it on and taking it from top of the figure to the bottom, all the way down, not being particularly fussy about it. I'm just going to wick a little bit of that away, there we go, and on this guy as well. So once I've done that, I'll just blot the paintbrush and have a quick look at the figure to see if there's any immediate pooling. It's usually on blades, so I will take most of the wash off the blades, but other than that, done. So in fact what I will do is just swap them two bases around. Okay, so our command stand is done in a different colour. So this arch base, again, just quite a generous blob of Seraphim Sepia, and just drag it down. Now, many gamers will come back and after this stage and re-highlight the figure. I won't. I don't. I won't, or I don't. I both. I don't do either. I really don't see the need, because I don't think honestly that these washes stain the colour or darken them too much. That's the sort of effect we're looking at. Let's just so I can improve the lights slightly. Just runs down into the depths. Right, let's go on to the famous Agrax Earthshade. Now this is the dark brown. This is the colour that people tend to use the most, I think. I think that's fair to say. I think this is the colour that, for this technique, people tend to use this colour more than any other colour. Here we go. So let's look at how this reacts for this guy at the front. So generous amount of Agrax, and we're going to go from the top to the bottom. Let's drag it down, and there we go. Same for this guy at the side, but don't need to re-dip, and just keep pushing the ink around. A bit more. There we go. And quite, I think you'll agree, quite a pleasing effect for not a lot of effort. So let's try it on these arches. Straight down, no messing. Get in there, just dollop it on. And to the front of the figure. Now you may find your favourite of these. I'm not sure Agrax is my favourite. I'm coming up to what I think is my favourite next, which is the Reichland Flesh Shade. So I'm just going to wick the rest of the majority of the wash off there, and then just push the wash around so that it doesn't pool too much. And you can always do this, just use your finger, sort of draw off these flat surfaces, because the flat surface of the bow there will just look stained, really. There's no creases, folds or depth to the model for the wash to go in, so it sort of pools on there. But this is my favourite. It's a reddish brown, or what I think of as a reddish brown. So we've got two arch bases, one from each unit. There we go. So we can keep that in focus. Generous amount of Seraphim Sepia, and just throw it on. And I will continue to reiterate and use this phrase to say minimal effort brings half decent tabletop standard figures in 15mm. Now, funnily enough, I don't think you get away with no highlighting in 28mm so much. But how Martin sculpts his figures, which is with lots of detail and definition. There you go. I think that's the appropriate word. Then it absolutely suits Martin's figures down to the ground. Look at the detail in this guy's quilted jack. It just runs into the detail, and that is testament to the sculptor, because I have seen figures that do not have this kind of detail on them. I've seen figures in larger scales that don't have this kind of detail on them. And the nice thing is that, so we're moving along, this will dry relatively quickly. Now with the Army Painter versions of these, the problem that you get is the colour stain, the higher level of the figure, so the coat or the helmets or whatever, the colour stains. Now this is the black, so this is the one that I'm less sure of. But again, in the name of experimentation and demonstrating, then I'm showing the style and method to you. So this one probably takes the most pushing around because it's black, essentially. I think it's keep the powder dry, paints all the English Civil War figures, the Peter Pig English Civil War figures. He uses Norm Oil, and I'm fairly sure that he says he doesn't go back and do any further work. So I think the best thing I can say is, for the price of, now these aren't particularly cheap, they're about £4 each, I think, these pots of Games Workshop ink. It's a bit of a scandal. And in fact, if you go to Luke's APS YouTube channel, he'll show you how to make this, or something that is near as damn it exactly the same and works in the same way, where you can make basically a jug full for the same price. It really is quite incredible. I've never done it myself, but I've often thought about it because they are about it might even be £5 a pot now. But I don't think there's a better ink out on the market, so I'm just pushing the black ink around a bit more and perhaps trying to wick off a little bit more than I do with the other colours, and just run my finger along those flat surfaces. You can see here this guy's bill, so I'll just wipe that off with my finger. There you go. So because it's my favourite, I'm going to, on these last two stands, I'm going to use the Reichland Flesh Shade, and then I'll have a look what we've got. But these figures are done. That's another 2 units done. I do like this colour. It gives, I don't know, it just gives it that sort of lived in, rusty, perhaps mucky look, and is dark enough that when it sits in the crevices of the figure it looks like shadow, and works over every colour. Again, I'll just use my thumb tip or whatever just to take the colour off the end of the pole arms, bills. You can see the face there, hopefully. There we go. And that's it. That really is it. So for less than an hour painting, well, maybe round about an hour's painting. I waffled for a little bit once I was talking about paints, etc. But what I'll do is I'll try and get some still photos of the figures up, but let's just show you some, let's have some compare and contrast between Seraphim Sepia and Reichland Flesh Shade. So there's definitely more of a subtle look with the Seraphim Sepia, and that sort of yellowish tinge to it. It's definitely the lighter of the colours, but works well, I think, I feel. This is Seraphim Sepia. Let's put it up against Norm Oil. And these figures will be in the same unit. You know, it doesn't matter. I've used a different wash on them. They've got a different. It gives a different tone to the figure, but you know. So that's Norm Oil. This is Reichland Flesh Shade. I recommend you give it a go, because if you, like me, you paint to play, not display, then this is a style of painting that could work for you. The video's gone on a little bit longer than I anticipated. I'll do a separate video, I think, to demonstrate the method that I use for the black undercoat figures. But that's been Billy Goat Wargaming. Showing you a bit of painting. I haven't got too much paint on my fingers, just the one spill. And we have 30 more Wars of the Roses figures painted to go along with the ones here that I did yesterday. Not them. And I'll soon be playing Bloody Barons. Thank you.